Sir, you please stand, raise your right hand, be sworn. Solemnly swear the testimony you will give before this committee is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. Chair recognizes counsel for the committee, Mr. Ginsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Witt, would you state your full name for the record?
Louis Stephen Witt.
Mr. Witt, I would like to direct your attention to November 22nd, 1963. Were you in Dealey Plaza in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963?
Yes, I was.
Did you witness the assassination of President Kennedy?
Yes.
Have you previously testified about the assassination of President Kennedy?
No.
Have you ever given information to any law enforcement bodies concerning the assassination?
No.
Mr. Witt, what did you do on the morning of November 22nd, 1963?
I guess I went to work in the usual manner, about 8 or 8:30, had a normal work morning.
And where did you work at that time?
For the Rio Grande Insurance Company.
Mr. Witt, could you hold the microphone closer to you?
Yes.
I believe we're having trouble hearing you. Thank you. What did you do at lunchtime on that day?
Well, I went out, as I usually did every day when the weather was decent, for a walk.
Were you carrying anything?
Yes, on this particular day I was carrying a black umbrella.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I would ask that the exhibit marked as JFK 405 be entered into the record. Would Mr. Witt, can you identify exhibit 405?
I would say that's the umbrella I was carrying.
Why were you carrying an umbrella that day?
Actually, I was going to use this umbrella to heckle the president's motorcade.
How had you gotten this idea?
In coffee break conversation, someone had mentioned that the umbrella thing was a sore spot with the Kennedy family. Being a conservative type fellow, I sort of placed them in the liberal camp, and I was just going to kind of do a little heckling.
Are you saying that you were going to use the umbrella as a symbol for the purpose of heckling?
I think that would cover it.
On November 22nd, 1963, were you aware of the motorcade route?
No, not really. I knew that they would be going down the center part of town somewhere in the noontime.
What route did you follow during your walk?
Well, when I left the building, which was located at the corner of Elm Street and Field Street, I went south on Field Street over to Main Street. This was where the crowds of people were, where the people were lining the sidewalks on either side.
When you reached Main Street, in which direction did you head?
I traveled west. This would put me turning right from the direction that I came.
West on Main Street?
Yes.
Why did you continue in that direction?
Well, every day I walk someplace, and looking back, the only reason I can account for my going that direction as opposed to the other direction would be that since I was carrying that stupid umbrella and intent on heckling the president, and not being a person who was given to, prior to this time, doing things that would bring myself into notice, the only thing I can say is that I had went down the street where I assumed there would be fewer people because the buildings on the west end of the street, or the lower end of the street as I might refer to it, there were either no buildings or there were low buildings where there were not a lot of people working.
How far did you go on?
Mr. Witt, would you be kind enough to pull that microphone closer to you? We're having some difficulty hearing you. Right.
Is that too close, or is that about right?
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
How far did you go on Main Street?
Well, I walked all the way down Main Street to the courthouse records building area and on to Houston Street.
Which way did you travel on Houston?
Well, at this time, I think I must have been planning to go back to the street that I worked on, Elm Street, which would be 1 block over. I traveled north over toward Elm Street.
What did you do once you arrived at Elm Street?
Well, I ended up turning left and going down into what's known as Dealey Plaza. The only reason I can think that I ended up down there was possibly I looked down there and saw an area where there were not a large group of people. There were people in that area, but there was also in this area which later became known as the grassy knoll, there was no one out in that area in any great numbers.
What did you do when you reached the grassy knoll?
I think I went sort of, maybe halfway up the grassy area, somewhere in that vicinity. I'm pretty sure I sat down.
Were you waiting for the motorcade?
Yes.
Do you recall how long you waited?
I really couldn't say. I don't think I was there very long, since I was not that all-far determined to carry out what I set out to do. I'm sure that I didn't wait a great length of time.
Did the motorcade come soon thereafter?
Yes, it apparently did.
What did you do when you saw the motorcade coming into the area?
Well, as I recall, the motorcade had already made the turn and was coming down Elm Street, going west on Elm, before I became aware that it was there. And it would have been, from a straight line position, it would have been off to my left about like this when I saw it.
What did you do when you saw it approaching you?
I think I got up and started fiddling with that umbrella, trying to get it open, and at the same time I was walking forward, walking towards the street.
And you have testified that you were opening the umbrella to use it as a symbol, hoping to catch the president's eye?
Yes.
Could you elaborate further as to the type of symbol you thought you were applying?
Well, I just knew that it was a sore spot for the Kennedys, that I just knew the vague generalities of it. It had something to do with something that happened years ago with the senior Kennedy, Joe Kennedy, when he was ambassador to England.
What happened next?
Beg your pardon?
What happened next? I believe you testified that you were moving forward, opening your umbrella as the motorcade was approaching you.
Yes.
Limousine.
As I moved towards the street, still walking on the grass, I heard the shots that I eventually learned were shots. At the time, somehow it didn't register on me as shots because they were so close together, and so many of it, it was like hearing a string of firecrackers, something like this. It didn't, at that moment, it did not register on me as being that.
Did you react in any way?
No, I continued to move forward and finally got this umbrella up in the air. I think by the time I got the thing up in the air, I was over and possibly standing on the retaining wall.
Did President Kennedy see your umbrella?
I have no way of knowing. I wouldn't know.
What do you next recall happening?
Let me go back a minute. As I was moving forward, I apparently had this umbrella in front of me for some few steps, whereas other people saw, as I understand, saw the president shot and his movement such as that. I did not see this because of this thing in front of me. The next thing I saw after I saw the car coming down the street, down the hill to my left, the next thing I saw, the car was just about at a position like this, at this angle here. And at this time, there was the car stopping, the screeching of tires, the jamming on of brakes, motorcycle patrolman right there beside one of the cars. One car ran up on the president's car, and a man jumped off and jumped on the back. These were the scenes that unfolded as I reached a point to where I was seeing things.
What did you hear at that time? Did you hear any voices?
I don't recall any voices at that particular time. After I finally became aware that something had happened, you know, something terrible had happened, I just sat down. I was standing on the retaining wall, and I just sat down, just right straight down. And apparently I don't know if I laid the umbrella down or dropped it or what I did. Nevertheless, I think it ended up on the sidewalk, and I just sat there. Some of the things that I recall, there was one of the things that I remember seeing while standing, there was a couple. I looked down to the right, and there was a man and a woman, and they were covering some children. They were lying down, and they were covering these children with their body. And this may have caused me to sit down, or I may have just sat down because I was stunned, because there for a few minutes or for a few seconds at least, I didn't seem to be able to collect my thoughts. Sometime later, after the cars moved out, when all this activity of the cars stopping and the cars moved out, I recall a man sitting down to my right, and he said something like, "They done shot them folks. They done shot." He repeated it 2 or 3 times, but there was repetition, him saying the same thing.
What was he saying?
He was saying, "They done shot them folks," something to this effect.
Can you describe this man?
I remember him as being a Negro man. I don't know if I ever actually looked at him for any length of time or not.
Did you hear any other voices?
Well, there was sort of a pandemonium all around. The other thing that stands out in my mind is there was a woman or a girl, a female voice up behind me, shrieking and crying, and she again repeated the same thing several times. She said something to the effect, "They shot those people right before my eyes," or something like this. Anyway, there was repetition in what she said. She said it 2 or 3 times.
Mr. Witt, at this time, please refer to Exhibits 130 and 404. Exhibit 130, which is already on the easel, was previously entered into the record. Mr. Chairman, I would ask at this time that Exhibit 404 be entered into the record.
Without objection, it may be entered into the record at this point.
Mr. Witt, can you identify the photographs on Exhibit 130 on the left?
Can I identify him in what?
Can you identify for instance, the 2 pictures of the man in the top 2 photographs of that exhibit?
Well,
with the arrows pointed?
Yes, that seems to be me.
In the bottom left corner, there is an item in red Can you identify that?
That would be this umbrella.
And in the bottom right corner, can you identify the person sitting?
I'm sure that's me. I'd have to say that's me.
In the other exhibit, which is 404, can you identify either of those men sitting?
Yes, the one on the right is definitely me.
Is the one on the left the man whom you were talking about earlier?
I really don't know. It could be, or it might not be. I really don't know. I don't recall ever actually looking at this person. I don't know if I ever replied to what he said. I could have just kind of speaking automatically, maybe agreeing with what he said or something like this.
Did this man have a walkie-talkie or a radio or any device of any sort?
I don't recall the person carrying anything, although I would say this, that they could have been carrying something and it would not have registered on me at this particular time.
Did he act in any peculiar manner?
Not that I recall.
Did you ever see him before or after that day?
No.
What happened next after you were seated and after you had heard these voices?
I continued to sit there for some period of time, and I don't know how long I was there. I don't know if it was say a minute or 2 or 3 minutes or longer. I doubt if I stayed there very long. The only other thing that comes to my mind that I can definitely remember is while sitting there and all of this commotion was going on around me, I just recall looking up to my left, and there was a policeman standing up there with a drawn gun. He was holding the point of the gun up in the air, the barrel of the gun.
How long did you stay in the area?
There again, I really don't know as to the number of minutes. I'm sure that I did not stay there very, excuse me, very long.
When you left, did you go back to work?
Yes.
When did you find out that the president had in fact been assassinated?
When I went back into the building, into the department where I worked, someone in there had a transistor radio, and the first thing that was said when I walked in is they said, "Did you hear about the president being shot?" And I said something to the effect of, I was down there in all of that.
Mr. Witt, some assassination critics have alleged that your actions with your umbrella were a signal to an assassin or to assassins to fire, or a signal that the president had in fact been hit. Were you signaling to anyone besides the president?
No, no one.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I would ask that the exhibit marked as JFK 404 be entered into the record.
Without objection, may be entered into the record.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to correct that to exhibit 406.
Maybe so corrected.
Mr. Witt, exhibit 406 is a copyrighted diagram drawn by assassination critic Robert B. Cutler, which shows 2 umbrellas with rocket and flechette attachments. Mr. Witt, do you know what a flechette is?
I do now. I did not prior to our interview yesterday evening.
Thank you. Did the umbrella in your possession on November 22nd, 1963 contain a flechette or a rocket or a dart?
No, it did not.
Has Exhibit 405, the umbrella, ever contained a flechette, rocket, or dart?
No, not since it's been in my possession.
Did the umbrella in your possession on November 22nd, 1963 contain a gun or a weapon of any sort?
No.
Has Exhibit 405 ever contained a gun or weapon of any sort?
This umbrella?
Yes.
No, no.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witt. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from District of Columbia, Mr. Fauntroy, for such time as he may consume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Witt, first of all, I wonder if you would tell us where you lived on November the 22nd, 1963. Where were you living?
My home address?
Home address.
At 7209 Embassy Street. I still live there.
I see. And where did you work at that time?
I was working for the Rio Grande National Life Insurance Company. They were located at 251 North Field Street.
At Elm and Beale?
At the corner of Elm and Field, yes, sir.
Do you still work there?
No, sir. That company merged with a company in Kentucky in 1968, and that's when I left the insurance company.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall what kind of day it was on the 22nd in terms of its the weather? In the morning when you got up at home?
I don't recall the early part of the day. I only know what the weather was around the noontime area.
I see. Did you keep your umbrella at home or did you keep your umbrella at work?
I don't. The umbrella could have been either place. I tried to keep an umbrella in the car, or it would either be at work. Unfortunately, it always seemed that if I was in the car in the parking lot and it was raining, the umbrella was at work, and I never seemed to have it at the right time. That morning, I don't know if I took it from the car to work or if it was already at my place of employment.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you left, so you don't know whether you took the umbrella from home to work and thence to the motorcade, or whether the umbrella was at work. You don't recall that?
I don't recall, no, sir.
All right. Now, when you left, let's assume that it was at work. When you left the office for lunch, is it your testimony that it was your intent to utilize the umbrella to heckle the president?
Yes, that's true. That was the only reason I was carrying it.
So that you weren't just going for a walk at lunch?
Well, I did go out for a walk every day.
I see.
Every day that the weather was not extreme, either raining or excessively hot. I took the umbrella along, going out if it was handy for me to do my little act of heckling. Then that was my plan. Yes.
So it was your intent to use the umbrella if you happened to be on the route that the president was traveling during that day.
That's correct.
But you did not know exactly what that route was.
I knew in general because all of the parades and this type of thing usually went down Main Street.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if you'd care to tell us a little more about your understanding of the significance of the umbrella and why you felt that it would heckle the president to raise the umbrella.
I knew the generalities of the thing. It had something to do with when the senior Mr. Kennedy was ambassador to England and the prime minister, some activity they had had in appeasing Hitler. The umbrella that the Prime Minister of England came back with got to be a symbol with some manner with the British people By association, it got transferred to the Kennedy family, and as I understood, it was a sore spot with the Kennedy family. And like I said, in coffee break conversations, someone had mentioned that I think it's one of the towns in Arizona, either Tucson or Phoenix, that someone had been out at the airport or at some place where some members of the Kennedy family came through, and they were rather irritated by the fact that they were brandishing the umbrellas. This is how the idea sort of got stuck in my mind.
Is it true that what you felt was that Mr. Kennedy would be sensitive because of the appeasement image of the umbrella as related to his father?
Not the appeasement thing. It was just, excuse me, I just understood that it was sort of a sore spot with them. And this was just one thing. I personally never thought too much of liberal politics in general. In this case, the Kennedy family just happened to be in office.
I see. And it had no relationship in your own thinking between Mr. Kennedy's posture with, say, the Russians?
No, that wasn't it at all.
But someone had, no, you had read in the paper that someone had used an umbrella to heckle the president, and your way into Dealey Plaza because there were not many people there, and you thought you would have an opportunity to in fact see the president and perhaps even heckle him. Now, do you recall seeing the motorcade approach Dealey Plaza?
Yes,
Now,
as a matter of fact, it was traveling west at the time I saw it.
All right, now where were you at that time?
I was sitting somewhere in the grass area there in Dealey Plaza.
All right. Will we suspend for just a moment?
He's telling me that he's very camera shy. Pressed it up and not have him. What were your commitments to it? Only mine would not. I said I couldn't have much for it. I said he couldn't know exactly what he was doing. Run on over. He says he can't give up his name. I can't remember why he's running. Yeah, I won't have him do it. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the brief interlude here. Mr. Witt, I was, as we suspended momentarily, I was asking you to recall the turning of the motorcade and the car in which President Kennedy sat into Dealey Plaza. Can you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And you, at that time, you were telling me, were sitting down, probably on the grassy knoll.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Now, describe to us what happened and what you did when the car turned into the Dealey Plaza.
Well, after I became aware of its presence, I got up and took the umbrella and started walking towards the street and opening the umbrella at the same time.
So that is, to the best of your recollection, you, as you approached the sidewalk, you were opening the umbrella.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right, and the car is now passing, and you describe to us what happened.
Well, as I was moving forward, opening this umbrella, it was somewhere at, excuse me, it was somewhere at this point that I heard the shots. And I continued to move forward and eventually brought the umbrella up over my head. I think by this time I was, had already, by the time I got the umbrella up over my head, I was at the retaining wall and standing on it.
All right. Now, the car is moving beyond you now. Are you aware that that the president has been hit at the point that after you hear these firecracker-like shots?
No, sir. My view of the car during that length of time was blocked by the umbrella being open. And the next time I saw the car, after I saw it coming down on my left, traveling west, the next time I saw the car was when this activity of the car stopping, the one car rushing up on another, the motorcycle patrolman stopping, there was this screeching of tires, this sort of thing. One thing I recall, there was a movement in the president's car, but this time I don't recall seeing the president. He must have, I'm sure he was down. The only thing I recall was there was a sort of a pink movement, and that was Jackie Kennedy, I think, wearing a pink dress or something. This pink thing stood out in my mind, and all of this happened in very rapid order. As soon as the one car ran up behind this one, a man jumped off, and I think the first car was pulling out about the time he jumped on the back.
Your testimony is that you then sat down where you are pictured there.
Yes, sir.
In the exhibit. And
at this point, I was aware that something terrible had happened.
Something terrible had happened?
Yes. At the time that I was moving forward with this umbrella in front of me, I was not aware of what was happening, even though I had heard the shots, until the movement, all this activity with the cars. That was my first awareness, and it was at this point that I just sat down.
Mm-hmm. And as you sat, you recall that two things. One, that you recall seeing a couple covering their children, you say off to the side?
Yes, off to my right.
And you recall the presence of someone sitting beside you. Is that true?
That's correct.
And someone from behind you saying something?
Yes. I don't know which of these came first, but the person sitting to my right said something. something to the effect that they done shot them folks, something like this. I think it was repeated about 2 or 3 times. There was repetition. I don't know if they meant to be talking to me or if they were just talking out loud to themselves. As I testified before, I don't think I ever actually looked directly at this person. I don't recall ever, say, just turning and taking a good look at the person. I think what I was doing, I was just, at this point, I was somewhat stunned, and I just heard this while sitting there. At about this same time, I don't know if it was before I heard this or after, about the same time there was this female voice up behind me shrieking and saying, "They've shot those people, they shot those people." I think she may have said, "They shot those people before my eyes," or something like this. There were a number of people I could hear crying in the background, this sort of thing.
So that your description of your emotions after sitting down would be that you were stunned. Is that true?
Yes, once the realization that something
Terrible
had happened, yes, I was stunned.
I must admit that my reaction to the picture by which you were ultimately identified was one of a very cool cat. That is, you look rather cool there to me, but you would describe...
I can assure you I was not that all cool. I think one of my reactions was knowing that I was there with this stupid umbrella and heckling the president, and of course I didn't know that the president had been killed. As a matter of fact, I didn't know he had been shot. I just knew that something had happened by the activity and what seemed to be in the air around me. But I think my own thinking may have been at the time that I'd have to describe it as a kind of like a bad joke that had gone sour, or a practical joke you'd pulled on someone that had gone sour, since I was there with this thing and for that purpose.
Mr. Witt, is it your testimony that at no time did the Dallas police or the FBI contact you about your presence at Dealey Plaza at this time?
No. In later years, after all this came up, I have always wondered why they didn't, but no one ever, so far as I know, no one ever made any attempt to find out who I was or why I was there.
When did you find out that you were a subject of suspicion? That is, that the umbrella man was somehow involved in the assassination?
When the committee sent these things to the newspapers, and it was printed in the local papers, in the Dallas paper there. As a matter of fact, I didn't see it on the day that it came out. We take the afternoon paper, the evening paper. I didn't see it on the day that it came out. I saw it later after I had taken the newspapers to work because I wrapped small parts in it for shipping. And it was this point that I saw the thing and read the thing and was then aware that someone was looking for me, so to speak.
So that, is it your testimony that you did not learn that somebody was concerned about the umbrella man until 10, 15 years after? To 1978, only in 78 were you aware?
As far as I know, no one was concerned with me.
So that explains, therefore, why you did not yourself contact the FBI or the Dallas Police Department, because you were not aware that someone with an umbrella in Dealey Plaza was an object of interest.
No, as a matter of fact, I wasn't aware that I was an object of interest. As a matter of fact, I have found out since in the last few weeks that there have been countless number of books and all sorts of controversy over this thing. But I've drifted along all of these years, and I've never seen one of these books because I've never been a fan of this assassination thing. I don't go out of my way to read anything about it. So it's sort of all gone over my head up until the last few weeks.
Now, is it your testimony that you did in fact see this picture in the papers in July of this year?
I saw this picture right here, the blurred picture in the lower right-hand corner of that.
And did you recognize it as yourself?
After I read the account, yes.
And why didn't you come forward then?
Quite frankly, I didn't, at this point, I certainly didn't want anybody to know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
I would say further that had you never found me, I would have been far happier than I am right at this moment.
Mr. Chairman, I'll suspend at this time in the event there are other members who have questions for the witness.
Mr.
Just a little time.
All right. Chair will protect the gentleman's time. Mr. Witt, the umbrella which lies before you on the witness table, did you bring it here today?
I brought it from Dallas, and I turned it over to Mr. Gensman yesterday.
And has that umbrella been in your possession from November 22nd, 1963 until today?
Yes, it has.
Has never left your possession for any reason?
Well, I would have to...
Other than here when you gave it to Mr. Gensman?
No, as a matter of fact, the day that I went back to work, this umbrella was just tossed back on the rack, where the raincoats and other umbrellas would have been.
Sure.
It could have been used by any number of people. There were quite a number of people who worked in this department. Young boys who went out on errands, they could have taken this umbrella any number of times in or out.
Okay. Now, I know that when Congressman Fauntroy was questioning you, it had been his intent to ask you to demonstrate the way in which you had held the umbrella on that specific date. But he was informed by counsel for the committee you had made a specific request that you not be asked to make such a demonstration. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And is that still your request to this committee?
Yes, sir. My line of thinking is that since we're not in the same area, we couldn't exactly duplicate what I did there. The only thing, my doing that, it would just be more fodder for an over-eager press back in Dallas to show this off and continue to embarrass me and my family more so than we have already been embarrassed.
Certainly.
I would add at this point that we've been through quite a bit. I brought it on myself, but nevertheless, we've been through quite a bit already.
Well, I certainly understand that, and I'm sure this committee is going to respect your wishes in that respect. I have one concern, though, and that is that if the committee does not cause the umbrella to be opened up, it may lend, once again, more speculation that the reason we didn't open it was because there was such a dart gun in it. For that reason, I'm not going to ask you to do it, but I think that it's important that committee staff open this umbrella so we can ascertain there's no dart gun in it.
As far as I'm concerned, they're certainly welcome to.
All right. Can we have someone from the staff do that? That Miss Cynthia Cooper of the committee staff.
Not suspicious.
Maybe you ought to turn that way with it.
That's what it always did when I took it out in the rain.
Cindy. Hold it up. Be very careful.
Well, I guess there's no gun in it. Thank you very much. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Devine.
Mr. Witt, we understand your reluctance to be here, and we appreciate very much your coming forward. Just for the record, would you tell the committee what you did when you saw your picture in the paper? To whom did you report, or what did you do?
When I saw the picture?
Yes.
I didn't do anything at that time. I was working at the time I saw it and was aware that I was wanted by this, for questioning by this committee. Yes. I didn't do anything. I didn't make any effort to contact this committee or anyone else. I just did nothing.
Well, how did you become revealed publicly as the person with the umbrella?
As I understand it, one of my good friends
In quotes.
went to the press. As a matter of fact, a couple of guys came into where I work and started barraging me with the questions, and then I knew that it was just a matter of time until you know, they would have my name in the paper, and then it would be known. And so for me, it was just a matter of waiting until somebody came along and said, I want to talk to you.
Fine. Well, now, Mr. Witt, getting back to the time and the place, I think in your original testimony in response to a question from counsel was that you heard a shot or something when you were standing there by the grassy knoll. Could you tell where this disturbance or this shot came from in relation to where you were standing?
No, sir, I really couldn't. Of course, now there were a number of shots, and they all seemed to be just rapid, just very close space. And as to the direction, I couldn't say.
You do not know, or you cannot recall from what direction they may have come? Is that
no, sir, I'm sorry, I can't be of any help there.
Could you tell this committee, and we recognize that it's been 15 years nearly, can you tell this committee how many shots you thought you heard?
I really couldn't say. Just remembering, I'd have to say 3 or more.
3 or more. Now, were they in rapid succession, or were there intervals?
As I recall, very rapid.
Unless you have some objection, would you demonstrate by rapping your knuckle on the table on about the time interval you feel that you remember the shots were fired?
I don't know if I could really give you a good example, but it was just, it seems to me that they were just one right behind the other, just immediately behind the other.
As I recall, when the President's motorcade was moving towards you, you were standing, and did you run the umbrella up and down as a symbol of Neville Chamberlain, or did you just hold it up, or did you point it in his direction, or what did you do specifically?
I really don't recall. I could have moved the umbrella up and down, but I just don't recall.
But then when the disturbance occurred and the presidential motorcade moved out, you sat down.
Yes, sir.
And there was someone beside you, as is indicated by that lower right-hand picture?
Yes, I still don't know if they were sitting there when I sat down, or if they moved to that point later. I don't remember.
Did you say you saw people running then, after you were seated?
No, at one point there was the person that I mentioned before as running was a man who jumped off of the second car and ran and jumped onto the back of the president's car.
I'm talking primarily about spectators. Was there any movement among the spectators that you noticed?
Not that I recall of spectators. There was people who seemed to run from the street up that grassy knoll, but somewhere along the way I heard that these were Secret Service men or maybe plainclothes policemen.
But when you say running up the grassy knoll, would mean in a direction away from the president's car?
Away from the street, and it would be to the, well, I guess it would be up to the side of that school book depository building.
You mentioned you saw a police officer with a revolver or a handgun in a raised position?
This was some time, after some time had elapsed.
Are you talking about seconds or minutes?
More in minutes. This was after I had sat down. As a matter of fact, it was somewhere about the point where I guess I was getting ready to leave.
And after the motorcade moved out and the crowd was mulling around, you just casually went back to your place of employment?
I don't know if casually describes it or not. I did pick up the umbrella and go back up Elm Street to the building where I worked. The one end of the building was on Elm Street.
And that's the first time you learned that the president had been shot?
After I got back into the building, yes, sir.
Fine, that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Time of gentleman has expired. Gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be very brief, but Mr. Witt, in light of what Mr. Fauntleroy and the chairman had mentioned to you earlier, I'd like to know, for the last 15 years, you kept that umbrella at your home or your business place or someplace. Is that correct?
Yes,
You know, and just looking at it, even though I know it flapped over when the young lady opened the umbrella up a minute ago, but to me, the condition of that umbrella is in pretty good shape, wouldn't you say?
I suppose.
Other than it's flipping over on the wrong side. You know, you can buy a new one and it will flip over. Why did you keep it 15 years? Did you have any reason for keeping that umbrella that long?
Not particularly. The only reason that I can think that the umbrella survived that long, like I say, and this thing was in use because it was thrown in there with all the others. The only reason I can figure out it's lasted this long is because of the size. You take this thing out and it's big and it's clumsy, whereas I had other umbrellas and would wear a raincoat or something that would take the use off of it.
How many umbrellas? You see you have others. How many do you have?
I have no idea. Over the years, I would have no idea.
Do you think you could have picked up the wrong one and brought here from Dallas?
It's quite possible. The only reason I believe almost 100% that is the very same umbrella is the fact that it is a big umbrella, and I'm almost positive that's the one.
You said some of the other younger people used the umbrella when you carried it on your job. They might have walked out with it. Could they have walked out with an umbrella and brought this one back, and it had been a different umbrella from the one that you used on the day of John Kennedy being assassinated?
That is entirely possible, but I really don't think that happened.
In your house, there are 2, 3, or 4 umbrellas there in your house. Is that correct?
I wouldn't know how many is there. There's some in the back closet. I usually have one in the car. The other day I stumbled over one in the garage where these things came.
But you did not identify that one 15 years ago, so I'm going to keep this umbrella here.
No. At that particular time I placed no significance on that umbrella.
Well, when this committee the staff made contact with you, did you go to your closet and say, well, I can identify this particular umbrella, and this is the one that I had on November 22nd of 1963? Were you able to say that to yourself?
Yes, when Mr. Moriarty was at my house there in Dallas, and he asked me if I still had the umbrella. I said, yes, I have an umbrella that I believe is the exact same umbrella.
You didn't have to look at the other umbrellas in your closet?
No, the other umbrellas, I believe, are little stubby things. Some of them may be folded up, or anyway, they're not big and clumsy like this thing.
So you buy a lot of umbrellas, is that right?
No, not particularly. And I'm 53 years old. You collect a lot of stuff in that particular time. Umbrellas are not a particular hobby of mine. It's just that over the years, although God knows it may seem that it is.
Let me ask you this, my final question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Witt, what do you think an umbrella is used for? Is it used to keep the sun off you, the rain off you, just to carry it along with you to match your top coat or something?
Well, an umbrella, I'm sure, can be used for many things. I'm sure you'd use it to keep the rain off, keep the sun off. In this case, you can use it to, as I did, for that purpose that I named.
And why are you using it today? Why did you come to Washington today with the umbrella? For what purpose?
Why did I?
Yeah.
Because I was subpoenaed.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Fithian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, for the record, I would like to ask permission of the chair to write a two-page historical memorandum on the tenure of Ambassador Kennedy in England and the Neville Chamberlain episode. I'm afraid that perhaps some might not get the clear significance of the umbrella as the symbol. For Ambassador Kennedy took a rather merciless treatment subsequent to his placing his own firm belief in Neville Chamberlain's policies. These, of course, came in great disrepute after Winston Churchill became Prime Minister and after the Munich conference broke down. And I think it might be helpful if at this point in the record we had a somewhat clearer historical explanation than we have, and I won't burden you with it now, but I would like permission to write such.
We'd certainly be happy to take advantage of the gentleman's expertise in the area of history and have the committee afford the benefit of such a document.
It is very hard 30 years hence, I believe, for people to understand how much a symbol the umbrella of Neville Chamberlain became. Mr. Witt, in 1963, you said you were a conservative and you didn't care much for liberal policies and you didn't care much for liberal politicians. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you remember what groups or organizations you belonged to in 1963?
None.
No organized, even any civic organizations or civic clubs?
At that time, no.
Have you ever belonged to organizations such as the White Citizens Council or
No.
the Ku Klux Klan or?
No. I'm just not a joiner of organizations in general. I'm certainly not a joiner of organizations either to the left or the right.
And I just wanted to make sure, I thank Mr. Devine for the questions on the shots, but you really at this date, even after thinking about all this time and try to reconstruct it mentally, as I'm sure you must have many times, you can't help the committee at all as to either the direction the shots came from or the number of shots fired.
No, I really can't. The only thing that I can recall is the rapid fire, their close spacing.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Anyone else seeking recognition? Okay. Gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. McKinney.
Mr. Witt, it's a pleasure to see you in person. I know it's not a pleasure for you to be here, and I really don't blame you, but I've been looking at that picture for so many years that it's a pleasure to see you in person. I just want to go over briefly. You did hear gunfire, correct? And you say several shots in rapid succession.
Yes.
You really had no feeling at the time as to from what direction they came from?
No, sir. I really can't place them at any particular place.
You mentioned a policeman standing up behind you on the grassy knoll with a gun, I guess, sort of pointed up this way. Did you notice any massive or more than normal activity of, say, police or anyone running around, say, looking for people? Or as if they were looking for people?
No, not that I recall.
You were staring as I never disagree with my colleagues on this committee, particularly the member from the District of Columbia, since I'm one of his most ardent supporters. But I think you have a rather stunned look on your face in that picture in the lower right-hand corner. You're just sort of staring across the street, right? So that you really weren't spending much time. You've testified you didn't really even look at the guy next to you.
Yes, this is correct. And one of the gentlemen up there described me as being very cool. I'm afraid he was...
well, I think your jaw's a little low in that picture to look cool. It looks to me like you're sort of...
I was definitely stunned. This is why that some things I don't remember. The things that I do remember are the things where there was repetition. The multiple shots, this person repeating themselves, the woman repeating herself, naturally the activity of the cars, that sticks with me. If I said anything to the person sitting to my right, I don't recall what it was.
One of the strange things about this assassination is that a few people write a few words about the picket fence or the retaining wall, and this committee's had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and find out what went on. They made a lot of money out of a few words, and we're spending money trying to figure out whether what they said was true or not. Did you notice anyone or anything going on by the picket fence or by the retaining wall in Dealey Plaza, which up at the top of the grassy knoll? Did you see anyone peering over the fence or jumping over the fence or chasing anyone, or did you see anything or hear anything from that particular area?
No, sir, I did not, because at no point was I ever facing that direction.
Since that area, though, was quite close to you in comparison to the book depository, do you feel in your own mind that if a shot had come from the quote-unquote grassy knoll, picket fence, retaining wall area, that you would have been aware of where that shot had been come from, as in general you were not aware of where any of the shots came from, but that area was quite close to you?
I don't know if I would have been aware of a shot that would have come from the area that you mentioned or not.
It's an unfair question because it asks for an assumption, and I apologize for that. I know that I'm not a lawyer, so I'm allowed to get away with that sort of thing. Did you notice the reaction or the movement or anything else of any of the other eyewitnesses, either across the street where you were sort of staring off or around you?
No, sir, I did not.
In fact, you really didn't even turn around and look at the guy who sat down next to you?
No, no, sir, I didn't.
You stated earlier, so I suppose this is a redundant question, that you did not look at the picket fence or at the retaining wall. So obviously, if I ask you, did you observe anyone behind them, it's a slight redundancy, but did you observe at any time anyone wandering around up behind those fences or walls, say before you opened the umbrella or before you left the grassy knoll or while you were walking down or any of that?
No, sir, I did not. Of course, the only time that I would have looked in that direction, if I even looked at all, would be when I was walking out into the middle of this grassy area. At no other time would I, because it would have been to, I guess, to either my back or my side. I really don't know how it's laid out down there. The picket fence and that sort of thing, I don't even know where it is.
I really think this is very unfair for me to do this to you because I have trouble summarizing my own thoughts, but I would like to, if I could, summarize what I think you have said, and then I guess just get you to agree with me or not. That is that you were sitting there waiting for the president to come by in an area where you were somewhat by yourself so that you could be noticed, so that you could brandish the umbrella. As you opened the umbrella, your visibility of the scene was obstructed. When you held the umbrella up, you became aware that something, and something pretty bad, had happened. You had heard shots, you had seen a Secret Service man leap onto the back of the other car, you had seen the pink blur, as we recognize it now, Mrs. Kennedy sort of scrambling on the back of the car. You closed the umbrella, sat down, dropped the umbrella on the sidewalk, and realized that what had started out as quote-unquote a joke for you had somehow or other, and you knew not how, turned into just something that hadn't worked. It was sour. Is that a pretty fair summary?
Yes, that's correct. I think that sums it up.
Mr. Witt, I thank you very much for coming. I know that you are an extremely private person and that this has been an extremely painful situation for both you and your family, and I, for one, who feels quite often that my family's privacy gets invaded for no good reason, sympathize with you and admire your being here and your willingness to answer questions that have been hanging around for about 15 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Edgar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I've been listening to Mr. McKinney's conversation with you about your recollection, I'm reminded of the fact that my wife just a few weeks ago witnessed a very tragic accident, and her first impression or expression was of shock when she saw the accident occur. But after the shock subsided, she had the wits to go and say to the policeman who eventually arrived that she would be willing to act as a witness, given whatever testimony she could about who was or who was not involved and exactly how the accident occurred for purposes of later investigations. Did it ever occur to you, as someone who literally sat down in front of where the president was assassinated, that you might have a bit or a piece of evidence that might make a contribution to the authorities looking into the death of President Kennedy?
I don't really know if this ever occurred to me or not. Had it occurred to me, I seriously doubt that I would have gone forward to volunteer any information.
Were you frightened? Were you frightened about the fact that you had deliberately set out to cause a scene or an embarrassment to the president?
Not frightened as such, but at that time there was a great deal of what I would have to describe as hysteria in the Dallas area about the president being killed. It could have been extremely unwise for me to have volunteered and became known at that time. It could have been dangerous to me or my family.
In what way would you have suspected it could have been dangerous to you or your family?
Well, you would kind of have had to live in the city to be aware of how things were then. In that everyone was, I really wouldn't know how to describe it. I really don't know, but nevertheless, I would say that I would not have made it known.
Were you afraid to go privately to the Dallas Police Department and share the information of what you saw with a police officer in the privacy of a room at the police station?
Oh, I really don't know. I think that I really think that if I had any real thought on this, and I can't recall one way or the other, it would be my guess that my line of thinking was that I really had nothing to offer other than just having done a foolish thing.
But you were concerned about the foolishness of your act, or were you concerned about the retribution that might come to you?
I don't know what my line of thinking is. It could have been both.
No. Well, I appreciate the fact that you've come forward now in response to the picture that we've shown. It's difficult this many years later to piece together all of the pieces of what happened in Dealey Plaza, and you do have a contribution to make, as has been exhibited by your presence here today. And I hope that others who may witness serious events like this will stop and think about making a contribution by notifying whatever authorities are there what they saw, even if it isn't very important to them or if it looks insignificant to them. It may play a part in unraveling a very complicated story. I yield back the balance of my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Sawyer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to request that when the gentleman from Indiana submits his historical analysis of the attribution of the umbrellas assembled in Neville Chamberlain and the senior Mr. Joseph Kennedy, who was then ambassador to the Court of St. James, that I be allowed to submit a one-pager on the subject of Scotch.
Jim, to say just for the benefit of the witness more than anyone else, the sensitivity of the late President Kennedy on this point stems as much as any other, not only because of the close family relationship, but because he was secretary to his father, the ambassador, during a part of that tenure. And I think it was all the more a kind of a personal thing. And he went on, of course, to write the award-winning thesis at Harvard entitled While England Slept. And a lot of people believe that that was, again, a sort of his own trying to wrestle with this bad taste that was left in the mouth of the American people because of Ambassador Kennedy's interpretation of the German-British pact at Munich.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from District of Columbia, Mr. Fontroy.
Mr. Chairman, I simply have one more question for Mr. Witt. Mr. Witt, you have indicated that you have learned over these years now that the umbrella man was considered a factor, that even someone has suggested that the umbrella was a gun and that it may have been a signal. You may want also to know, and therefore to help us, that the person sitting beside you has been alleged to have been a Cuban, and that other pictures taken in the plaza suggested that he may have been talking on a two-way radio while he was sitting beside you. And it would be of great interest to us to identify who that person sitting beside you was. And for that reason, I simply ask, is there anything that you can recall about the person that would enable us to find him, even as we found you, because your story certainly sounds plausible?
I wish that I could give you more information, but I'm sorry I can't now. As for him talking on a
two-way radio
while sitting beside me, I feel sure that I would have been aware of that, even though I was stunned and I don't recall ever looking directly at the man. But I believe that anyone who was sitting that close, as the picture shows it, I feel sure that I would have known if they were holding, because those walkie-talkie things are fairly large. They're certainly bigger than a person's hand. I feel like that I would have remembered that. I can't say with 100% certainty that I would have remembered that, but somehow I just feel like that I would have. One thing that I would, there are two things in having been shown these pictures where my memory was different from what the picture showed. Number one, the couple that were covering the children, I remembered them as being up close to me, as being fairly close, because I looked, you know, I saw them doing this, and in later years I've thought how ridiculous it was of me standing up there with gunfire going on, standing there like a tourist, and here was these people had the presence of mind to cover these children. The other thing is, in my memory, I don't remember a person sitting that close to me. The person that I remember is saying what he did and repeating it a number of times. I don't remember having been that close. I don't know if these pictures are taken at an angle that makes it look like that, or if my memory is playing tricks on me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Devine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one question for the purposes of the record, Mr. Witt. This appears to have been somewhat of an impulsive act on your part. I was wondering, is there anything in your history that you have been a demonstrator or a picketer or engaged in symbolic acts in the past, or is this just a single incident in your life that you wish it hadn't happened?
Never before. This was the only time. True, I wish that it had not happened. I am not a person who wants to bring himself into notice, and I think this very fact is what put me down there in that area, in this street that I went down. There was all of these people. Had I broke out this big oversized umbrella, there would have been people standing on either side of me and maybe questioning what the heck was I doing. By continuing my little walk, I don't know how long I continued to maintain the idea that I was going to do this, but I have the feeling that when I was headed back in the direction of where I work, that I saw this area down there and an open space where there were not all this many people around. So I would think it would be my particular personality of not wanting to be questioned by people or putting on a show in front of people that led me into that particular location.